The alarm did not sound like the drills we had practiced 100 times. It sounded wrong, sharp, and final. And in that first second, every cadet in the room froze, because we all understood, somewhere under our training, that this was not a simulation anymore. My name is Daniel Cross, and I want to tell you about the day I stopped laughing at Grace Sullivan. 3 weeks earlier, when Grace walked into our barracks at Halden Combat Academy, nobody thought much of her. She was small, quiet, and she carried her single duffel bag like it weighed nothing at all. She picked the bunk closest to the door, said her name once, and did not speak again for the rest of the evening. The rest of us filled the silence with questions she did not answer, and jokes she did not laugh at, and by the time lights went out, we had already decided who she was. Quiet, nervous, weak. Ryan Doyle decided it fastest of all. Ryan was the loudest voice in our group, the one who always had an opinion and never learned to keep it to himself. He was strong, fast, and confident in every way that the instructors seemed to reward, and he wore that confidence like a badge. On the second morning, during breakfast, he leaned toward Grace's table and said, loud enough for half the hall to hear, that the academy must be running low on real candidates if they were accepting cadets who could barely say 2 words. Grace did not answer him. She finished her food, cleaned her tray, and left the hall without looking back. Ryan laughed, and most of us laughed with him, because it was easier to laugh than to think about why her silence made us uncomfortable. For the next 2 weeks, that pattern held. Grace ran her drills alone, ate alone, and studied alone in the corner of the common room long after the rest of us had gone to sleep. Ryan gave her a nickname, the Ghost, and it spread through the barracks like a joke everyone agreed to keep telling. Olivia Bennett, one of the sharpest cadets in our group, tried to be kind to her once, offering to study together before a written exam, but Grace only said she preferred to work alone, and Olivia did not ask again. Ethan Hale, who bunked 2 beds down from Grace, told me one night that he thought something did not add up about her, that a person that quiet had to be hiding either fear or something else entirely, and he could not decide which. I told him not to overthink it. I told him she was probably just shy, and shy people did not belong in a program built to train soldiers for real danger. I was wrong about almost everything I believed that month, and it took one single morning to prove it. The morning started like any other. Sergeant Coleman gathered us in the training hall before sunrise and told us that today we would run our first full simulation inside the pressure chamber, a massive steel room built to copy the conditions of a damaged station corridor. The chamber had thick walls, sealed doors, and a computer system that controlled air, temperature, lighting, and sound, all designed to make the exercise feel as real as possible without any real danger involved. He reminded us that the weapons we would carry fired only marked rounds, harmless beyond a light sting, and that the entire point of the exercise was coordination under pressure, not actual risk. 14 of us walked into that chamber that morning. Ryan led the way, joking that he would finish the exercise before Grace even found the exit door. Grace said nothing. She simply checked her gear one more time before the door sealed behind us. The exercise began exactly as planned. Lights dimmed to a dull orange to simulate emergency lighting. A recorded voice announced a hostage scenario, and we split into 2 teams to move through the mock corridor, searching for a simulated target while avoiding motion sensors that would mark us out if we moved carelessly. For the first 10 minutes, everything felt almost fun, the kind of tense excitement that made all our training worth it. Ryan moved fast and loud, tagging 2 of the opposing team before they even saw him coming, and he made sure everyone heard him celebrate it. Then the lights flickered, and everything changed. It started as a small stutter in the orange glow above us, barely enough to notice. Then the recorded voice cut off in the middle of a sentence, replaced by a burst of static that made my ears ring. The floor beneath us gave a low groan, the kind of sound that machines make right before something breaks. Sophie Marsh, who was standing closest to the far wall, called out that the air felt different, thinner somehow, and colder than it had been a minute before. I did not believe her at first. Then I felt it too, a strange pressure building behind my eyes, the kind of feeling you get on a plane when it climbs too fast. Within 30 seconds, the main door we had entered through slid shut on its own and locked with a heavy metallic sound that echoed through the corridor. Ryan ran to it immediately and pulled at the release handle, But nothing happened. He hit the emergency panel beside it, and the panel stayed dark, completely dead. Somewhere above us, a thin hiss began, steady and constant, and I realized with a cold drop in my stomach that the chamber was not simply losing power, it was losing air, and it was losing it for real. Later, the investigation would explain that a fault in the environmental control system had triggered a full lockdown protocol meant for actual emergencies, sealing every exit and activating a real venting sequence instead of the simulated one programmed for the exercise. In that moment, none of us understood the cause. All we understood was that the exit was sealed, the air was thinning, and no one outside the chamber seemed to know yet that anything had gone wrong. Panic moves fast in a small space. Ryan slammed both hands against the door, shouting for someone on the other side to open it, though no one could hear him through the thick steel. Sophie sat down hard against the wall, breathing in short, fast gasps that were only making things worse for her. Ethan kept repeating that this could not be real, that it had to be part of the exercise, even as the lights kept flickering and the hiss of escaping air grew louder above us. I stood frozen in the middle of the corridor, doing quiet, useless math in my head about how much air 14 people could share in a sealed room, and how long that math gave us before it stopped mattering. It was Grace who moved first, and she moved like she had been waiting for exactly this moment her entire life. She did not shout. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm and clear, cutting through the noise without needing to compete with it. She told Ryan to step back from the door and stop wasting air on useless effort. She told Sophie to slow her breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, and to keep her hands still in her lap. She told the rest of us to sit down against the walls, conserve energy, and stop moving unless she asked us to. For a moment, nobody listened, because nobody was used to taking instructions from the quiet cadet nobody had bothered to know. Then the hiss above us grew sharper, and fear did what respect had not managed to do. We listened. Grace moved to the far wall, running her hand along a section of paneling near the base, until she found a small seam that the rest of us had never noticed. She explained, without slowing down, that every sealed chamber built to code needed a manual release somewhere along its structure, separate from the electronic system, in case of exactly this kind of failure. She said she had read the full specifications for the chamber on her first night at the academy, while the rest of us were still in the mess hall trading jokes about the new cadet who never talked. She pulled a thin release lever from her uniform pocket, a tool most of us had ignored during equipment checks because it looked too simple to matter, and she fitted it into the seam. She called Ryan over, and for the first time since we had met him, he did not argue or joke. He knelt beside her without a word. Grace explained that the panel hid a manual crank designed to force the door open by hand if the electronic lock failed, but that it needed 2 people pulling at the same time to move the heavy gears inside. Ryan grabbed the second handle she pointed to, and together they began to turn, slow and hard, muscles straining against metal that had not moved in years. While they worked, Grace kept talking to the rest of us, her voice steady, even as sweat ran down her face from the effort. She told Olivia to check on Sophie, whose breathing had grown shallow and fast again, and to keep her talking about anything simple, her favorite color, her hometown, anything to keep her mind away from the fear building in her chest. She told Ethan to press his palm flat against the wall near the hiss of escaping air and describe exactly where it felt strongest, so we would know if the leak was getting worse or staying steady. Every instruction was small, clear, and useful, and none of us questioned her again. Then Marcus Whitfield, one of the quieter cadets on the other team, cried out from near the corner of the corridor. In the confusion of the first minute, he had slipped and struck his arm hard against a metal support beam, and now he sat holding it against his chest, his face pale, unable to move it without wincing. Grace glanced at him once, said something quiet to Ryan about keeping the crank turning without her for a moment, and crossed the corridor to kneel beside Marcus. She examined his arm with quick, careful hands, asking him short questions about where the pain was worst and whether he could feel his fingers. She tore a long strip from the edge of her own uniform sleeve without hesitation and used it, along with a stiff length of plastic casing torn from a broken equipment box nearby, to hold his arm steady against his body. She told him the support would keep the injury from getting worse until real help arrived, and her voice stayed so calm through the entire process that Marcus, who had looked terrified a moment before, slowly began to relax. I watched all of this happen in under 2 minutes, though it felt far longer while it was happening. I had known Grace Sullivan for 3 weeks, slept 20 feet away from her every night, and I realized in that moment that I had never actually seen her at all. I had only seen the story the rest of us decided to tell about her. The crank groaned louder as Ryan pushed against it alone, and Grace returned to help him the moment Marcus was steady. Olivia kept Sophie talking in a low, gentle voice about a lake near her childhood home, and slowly Sophie's breathing began to even out. Ethan reported that the leak near the wall seemed to be holding steady rather than growing worse, which Grace said meant we still had a little more time than she had first feared, though she did not slow down for a second while saying it. The door gave way with a deep groan that shook the floor beneath us, sliding open just enough for a rush of fresh air to pour into the corridor. Somewhere beyond it, alarms were already sounding in the main control room, and I could hear boots running down the outer hallway toward us. Sergeant Coleman appeared in the gap moments later, his face pale with worry, shouting for medics before he had even fully seen us. The whole event, from the first flicker of broken lights to the moment that door opened, had lasted less than 4 minutes. It felt, to every one of us, standing inside that chamber, like it had lasted an entire lifetime. Medics rushed in to check on Marcus and Sophie, and within minutes, both were declared stable, shaken, but safe. The rest of us stood in the corridor outside the chamber, not quite ready to speak, watching Grace answer the sergeant's rapid questions in the same calm, steady voice she had used the entire time inside. She explained what had happened, what she had done, and why, without once making it sound like anything special. To her, it seemed, she had simply done what needed doing. Ryan was the one who finally broke the silence among us, and his voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. He asked Grace how she had known about the manual release, when none of the rest of us, despite weeks of study, had even known it existed. Grace looked at him for a moment before answering. She said that on her first night at the academy, while everyone else was getting to know each other in the mess hall, she had stayed behind to read through every safety document and structural plan the academy provided, because she believed that knowing the space around her mattered more than knowing the people in it, at least at first. She said she had not been avoiding us out of fear. She had been preparing, quietly, for exactly the kind of moment that had just happened, because somewhere inside her she had always believed that moment might come. Nobody laughed this time. Nobody had a joke ready. We simply stood there, looking at the cadet we had spent 3 weeks mocking, and understood, all at once, how wrong we had been. The academy launched a full investigation into the chamber malfunction that same day. Engineers found a fault deep inside the environmental control system, a fault that should have been caught during routine maintenance but had gone unnoticed for months. Sergeant Coleman told us later that the report praised Grace by name, crediting her quick thinking and calm leadership with preventing what could have become a serious tragedy. The academy quietly rewrote several of its emergency protocols in the weeks that followed, based directly on what Grace had done inside that sealed room. But the record that mattered most to me was not the one written in any official report. It was the one written into the way every cadet in our barracks looked at Grace from that day forward. Nobody called her the ghost again. Olivia tried calling her something else once, a nickname meant kindly, but Grace only gave her a small, flat look that made the new name disappear as quickly as it had arrived. She did not want a new label any more than she had wanted the old one. She simply wanted to be seen for who she actually was. And after that day, we finally saw her. Ryan changed the most, though he never said much about it directly. He stopped joking at Grace's expense and started, instead, asking her questions, real questions, about how she studied, how she stayed so calm, how she had trained herself to notice details the rest of us walked past every day. Grace answered him honestly, without pride and without impatience, the same way she answered everyone from that day forward. Slowly, over the following weeks, I noticed Ryan reading through equipment manuals in the evening instead of trading jokes in the common room, and I understood that Grace had changed more than just how we saw her. She had changed how some of us chose to train. I have thought about that morning many times since, long after I left Halden Academy and began serving on my first assigned post. I have met loud cadets who filled every room with noise and confidence, and I have met quiet ones who said almost nothing at all. I used to believe that courage looked like Ryan's version: fast, bold, impossible to ignore. Now I understand that courage sometimes looks exactly like Grace's version instead: quiet and patient, spending its early days simply learning where every exit lies, so that when the lights go dark and the air runs thin, it already knows the way out for everyone else in the room. That is what I learned from Grace Sullivan, on a morning that began like any other, and ended by changing the way I judge people for the rest of my life. Silence is not always weakness. Sometimes it is simply a person doing the quiet work that loud people never bother to do, waiting patiently for the one moment when that work will matter most. And when that moment finally comes, it does not need to shout to be heard. It only needs to act.